what do you see as the biggest construction need?
So the biggest need is probably retail, and then allow this co-creation where the user could then take what the computer put up and actually turn it into something real.
In terms of that, with like a site planning aspect.
So you can really get quick answers. What do we need to do to really, realize the full potential of land?
Welcome to the BIM Heroes podcast. In today's episode, we will be discussing the state of generative design with TestFit. At the beginning of this podcast, we always start off with introductions, so I thought we would start off with that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm Laura Paciano. I am SVP of growth at TestFit. Newer to the real estate side, I've come from the AEC side of things, and really just excited to be here and be part of this industry that I think has such opportunity for tech to come serve.
In terms of what TestFit is, let's get into a little bit of the history and how it was formed and why it was created.
Sure. So TestFit, for those that aren't familiar, is a real estate feasibility platform. We help you do site planning and really ultimately trying to use AI to help with building optimization. Our founder, Clifton Harness, and his co-founder, Ryan Grieg, were college roommates. And as many startups happen, one of our founders, Clifton, was pretty frustrated with his job. He was a trained architect working at a developer, and he was really trying to get, his unit mixes correct. And he was spending countless hours counting parking stalls, which he would then bring to his boss, who would also count them by hand. And he thought there had to be a better way. So he reached out to his college roommate, Ryan Grieg, and asked, who happened to be a video game developer, and said, hey, can you hack something together to help me out here and, make this automated, make it easier? And that's how TestFit really was started, is trying to help alleviate that mundane process that computers are really good at and humans shouldn't be wasting their time with.
And then just a brief history, from that point in which Clifton said, we've got a problem here, didn't per se like exactly that career. Talk about where that was and then the last few years of how that's progressed.
Yeah. So in the beginning, it was a really basic application that helps solve apartment unit mix. So that's where it started. That's when they kind of had the aha moment to say, there's probably some other people out there that could use this, and decided to kind of go all in. So starting with apartment unit mix, and then really kind of grew into solving some of those other error-prone, mundane tasks like counting parking stalls. And then the next step of that was really figuring out how to generate multiple options and then allow this co-creation where the user could then take what the computer put up and actually turn it into something real. And then eventually we started calculating things like yield on cost and, getting more deep into some of our different typologies.
What would you say the state of generative design is today?
I mean, for real estate in particular, or AEC, I think we recently were participating in a generative design report that was based on critical infrastructure, but really I think it applies to any development types. I think we're at the point where, some of this mundane things can be automated by computers and using AI, but I think the promise of that efficiency that generative design can bring is still yet to be realized. I think, we've got rising housing costs, we've got land shortages, and that need for optimization is there. And I think that's where generative design, from TestFit's point of view, is really ready to serve the industry.
Where do you think that AI stands right now? And where do you think it might go to help with this product or even generative design in the future?
Yeah, I think, we're at the beginning phases of this. I think we've got, the ability to start solving for parameters today and constraints. So user constraints put in, and I think, the industry has a few solutions that can help generate to those constraints. I think where we're still, lacking is the ability to focus on that competing with your goals of trying to get the most yield or, your unit mix correct. I think those are things that, we're still working on trying to solve for the industry. And I think overall, it's just the beginning phases, and there's a lot of opportunity ahead.
In terms of your journey to TestFit, how did that come about? Like, what is your background, and how does that relate to what they're trying to do with TestFit?
Yeah, so my early career, I'm kind of a startup to IPO, lucky, hopefully hat trick. My first real career growth was at Sonos in the early days. I think it was number 28 or something, where, I was on the marketing side of things, got to really see everything grow from a, tiny company to 1,000+ IPO. That happened to be, I saw it in a magazine and just landed there. And who doesn't love music? And then after that journey of 10 years, I was ready for something new. And at the time, it was pre-pandemic. So looking for something nearby that I could travel to, I happened to find Procore. It was still in its early days, I think about 200 people at the time, and really just fell in love with the construction industry. Salt of the earth people, building things that we actually can see and touch. It was really exciting. And to see that the technology hadn't served that industry yet was really something that kind of ignited that passion in me. I've always loved building things, but technology's always been, in the heart of it. So just seeing where that intersect really got me into this AEC space. And then TestFit in particular, there's luckily a lot of women in tech, in construction, that are helping each other and mentoring one another. And my colleague now, Alexine, and I had been kind of co-mentoring with each other. And at the time, I was thinking about making a change. And she said, well, TestFit's actually looking for someone. And she came from BIM track. So it's a small world in the AEC real estate industry.
Yeah, just on a side note, I'm a big user of Sonos, and also
Nice.
the company I work for uses Procore. So
Oh, well, there you
definitely
go.
a double whammy, and now you got your next adventure with TestFit.
Yes, yes.
That's great. The next question I've got is centering around this idea of the industry that you've got into with Procore and going from there. Is with TestFit, where do you feel the biggest challenges are in adoption? Is it on the owner side? Is it on the architecture side, or the general?
Yeah, I think, there's two, I would say from the architect and the owner, which slash developer, in our case, is probably where we serve the most. We do have GC customers, but most of the time they're using it in a either consultative practice, or they've got their own design build side of the house. I'd say on the architect side of things, the frustration of adoption is not technical. They're used to these tools and building and, technology serving them that's been around for a while. But at the same time, they want it to do, all of the details that something like, your drawing software would do. And so teaching them about this is really just to get you to yes, no, real quick. Is this worth spending time on and making decisions? In fact, TestFit's, pride is really when we can kill a potential deal really fast so that you don't waste time on it. So that's the side of the architect that probably has frustration with adopting. And then on the developer side, they're not used to using these anything design related or spatial. It's really a lot of spreadsheets, and so it's teaching them how to use the software at the beginning. But then they see the immediate value in being able to say no really quickly, and don't necessarily get frustrated with not being able to continue making very detailed construction drawings from it.
So let's talk through that, because I know that that's one of the biggest things with a lot of capital that's out there versus with the private or public market. How does that deal evaluation and deal planning look like in TestFit that might be different than your traditional spreadsheet where they're saying this many units, this many doors in an apartment complex. If I put it on this piece of property, this is how much I will gain from it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, TestFit was really born from trying to connect all of those stakeholders in creating a deal or a project to move forward. So we've really built this, and it's just the beginning of the platform to show as you're, identifying a potential site, you're putting to see what you can fit on it. And that's where our configurators come in to really generate those design options. You are immediately seeing how that's affecting your, top level pro forma. So you can see floor area ratios. You can see, how much percent square foot or percent of the acres is being covered, how many 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms if you're looking at multifamily. So it really puts all of it in the front of, mind and top of mind. And that's where the collaborative nature really comes in, as the architect can say, this is never going to be able to be built this way, or the contractor can say, you're never going to be able to build it at that kind of cost if you're, or you're not going to be able to rent it. The developer is going to look at the ceiling height and say, people are going to not want this short of ceiling height. So those were kind of some of the ways that we're trying to address those issues.
And there's some of those costs. Where are those coming from? Are they manually inputted? Is it AI driven from RS means? Where does those costs come from?
Yeah, I mean, you're hinting at where this could go, right? So today, these are user input. So you put in cost per square foot, land cost, rental cost from your knowledge that you've got as the expert. In future, we've been exploring, can we look at, actual estimates that were realized in projects that move forward, as built as far as costs go. So there's potential for those inputs to really be fed in more of a machine learning side of things, which we have not tapped our toe into yet. But I think it's an exciting place where this could go.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, once you have that database set forth, you can then pull that data over time. If it's your data or another database being pulled in.
Yeah, I mean, you could look at RS. Yeah, you could look at RS means, but I think we're really interested in getting as built your projects, what you were able to do in this region with this type of building.
In terms of that, with like a site planning aspect, you have the map, and that's worldwide. So if an owner is in a region, it can be blown up just for that one region, or if they're worldwide, they can track those projects across the whole world.
Yeah, I mean, there's companies out there doing things like that where they're doing, value engineering, especially with, early stage conceptual drawings and conceptual estimates. So I think there are exciting players out there. There are so much more that we could be doing, but there's a trove of data out there. And now that the new shiny object of AI is in front of us, I think now we can actually do something with that data.
So looking at site selection. So now that they've got a site that they think they're going to use and buy and build, explain how that first step occurs with inside of TestFit, where they can start to bring in different data sets or different ideas of what the building or type could look like.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that it works in TestFit, we have a bunch of data maps that show you contextual information right in Canvas. So you can see what your environmental risk might be, what your site constraints are. We've got zoning data where you can see, what your setback needs to be. So as you're selecting a parcel, you're able to, pull back and have that zoning information up front. So as you're creating a building, you'll even be tracking whether or not it's meeting that code, or if it's something you're going to have to ask for an exception.
And that also for heights and also contours, all those types of information can be brought in.
Absolutely. And then I'm sure you've seen some of our fun GIFs on social media showing that you can, at height, pull the setback. So it's something that really makes it that manual co-creation of leveraging AI really powerful.
And with that, is it more of a manual modeling of it, or is there a lot of co-authoring AI that you're starting to see within the product when they're using it?
Yeah, so the way that the TestFit works today is we're able to, as you select what kind of building typology you want, be it low density, high density, industrial, you're able to identify one of the configurators that we have modeled. So it's TestFit's models that we have created, and you are able to set your constraints, and then the configurator will come back with these are the best options to pick from, and it usually has a couple to select from. But then the real magic happens on the co-creation side where the user can, move parts of the building, heights of the building, whatever their interest is, and they can see real time. The AI is calculating what that changes to the top level performa, unit mix, et cetera.
And with that real-time AI, you can then take the concept and change it almost basically immediately, and
Yeah.
different styles of what that design could.
Yes, absolutely.
And then from that, it's taken a lot of that manual work out of what you would traditionally see conceptual design start at with a napkin sketch or even in a authoring tool.
Exactly. We're trying to really reinvent the whole development process by kind of skipping through and starting at a better starting point.
And then what type of direct integrations does TestFit pull in to help with that? And then how does that export out, let's say, to an authoring tool?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, some of the data layers that we have around zoning, parcel data, wetlands, those are all available in Canvas, and you can see that happening. And then once you've gotten to a concept that you're excited about, a conceptual site plan, you're able to export that straight out into like Revit to be able to continue into the construction design documentation.
And then on the back end, what type of tools could you export to out of this? Is it to other authoring tools? So going from that to, let's say, SketchUp.
Yeah, you can export those into SketchUp and Revit to continue that process in the back end.
So going from what we would see in, let's say, a single acquisition, and then let's say, do you see a lot of urban planners of cities? So not just owners of, like, let's say, one property, but let's say the entire city plan, whether it's capital projects in terms of you know public entities building, or if it's private, public-private relationships. How would that
Yeah.
work in the urban planning?
Yeah, absolutely. We do have, city planners, cities actually themselves using TestFit's Site Solver to be able to create, urban plans as well. The other thing that I'd love to mention right now is that we've actually released a free product for urban planning called Urban Planner, where we are able to take what we've built, the kind of platform that resulted from building these really deep vertical configurators into multifamily and industrial, and now we're working on retail and data centers, where, to really realize our mission was to serve more building types. And we kind of took a step back and realized that we have a way to do that because we have developed these overall, how do roads work, how do setbacks work, how do heights work. And all of that, we are able to provide a free tool to the industry with free massing for cities planning and or, specific site development as well. But it really democratizes access to that. So you can really get quick answers. What do we need to do to really, realize the full potential of land?
And some of those data maps that you might find will also include GIS information for, like,
Yes.
utilities, railroads. I know in the area that we build in downtown Raleigh, one of the biggest challenges that we have is that there's not a lot of databases or authoring tools that pull stuff like that in. And that's a major impact of how you go about deals, where that might have been in the past completely missed. Just explain what you've seen and maybe where TestFit might go on that.
Yeah, we've definitely had a lot of requests around things like power lines and actually as we're dipping our toe into data centers, like where can we find power? So we're constantly looking. We've been adding new Esri data layers to TestFit, and most of that has just been prioritized based around users' request. So I see we've also been evaluating a couple other providers that may have some great solutions coming soon to TestFit. But yeah, it's contextual data is, key to being able to create a feasible site plan.
And do you see not only, let's say, like Esri, but maybe data maps that are from the local municipalities? And different cities have different ways of doing that. Just
Yeah.
if that could be a possibility.
Yeah, we probably use some sort of aggregator. I mean, our zoning information is coming from Zonomics. They do link to the municipality websites that have the actual documentation, so you can go review that. But it's I mean, permitting process, there's a few players out there working on that. It's a lot of work. And unfortunately, there's no single structure database, which I'm, preaching to the choir out there.
Now, in terms of reality capture, so one of the big things that's another big buzzword in our industry, it's been that way for probably the last 5 to 10 years. What type of reality capture methods can you bring into TestFit? And maybe some of the things that you'd like to see in the future.
Yeah, we do have 3D maps available so you can see where things are at, and we're looking at adding different providers for that so you can pick your favorite solution. But as far as, immediate plans, I don't think there's any specific visualization that TestFit other than our 3D models that we're creating of TestFit's model itself.
Could you see a big benefit of being able to bring in some of that live data versus using maps that might be a year old or half a year old?
Yeah. I mean, that's the immediate need and the immediate request, of course, from customers is like, I want to see more real time, and we're constantly exploring options to serve those needs to our users.
Yeah, because I think one of the things too that we always look at is, okay, we have the static reality capture methods that would give you a point in time. And then there's obviously other methods that have been out there for years that are getting more and more important on the dynamic front, like cameras and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think that's a major push to help with that deal acquisition, going forward. One thing I want to go into next is we talked a little bit about it, but it's where the GC comes in. So now that we've got this deal, it's been thought through by the architect, by the owner, by the developer, and they've decided that they're going to move forward with this piece of property. One of the things that I've always found is interesting or almost funny is that they would do that, and then they might be able to sell it for even more, just selling the land off versus actually doing the proposition.
Yeah.
So, where does the GC come into that picture, and then how do you see a lot of that happening today?
Yeah, I think today not as much as we would like. The vision is that GCs would be involved in this process early on. They would be able to do optioneering and value engineering through changes in the building shape. So how recently we actually released the ability to view all of the TestFit models and files that are being created in the cloud. So this is the first step that we have towards collaboration and being able to sit on a call like we're sitting now and bring up the model, be able to see what affects what, how much that would cost. And as we get more of that cost data we were talking about earlier, that's where the GC can really start giving true conceptual estimates that can help make decisions about what really is feasible on that site.
And do you see a point at which the GC kind of opens up that cloud-based deal pipeline and uses that to help them pursue work as well?
Absolutely. And I think, the relationship right now, coming from Procore, coming from the industry, like it is very segmented. Everybody's sitting in their own space with their own goals and they're working in their own systems. And so anything that we can do to bridge that gap and really get all of our collaborators and key stakeholders on the same page from the very earliest point, I think, the construction industry talks about pre-construction. But pre-construction, this is like the pre and pre-construction, right? There's so much more happening that is going to affect the success of the project ultimately that can be risk mitigation from the very earliest days. So yeah, we're excited about that potential.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I think the industry for the GC side of things is, you look at your current backlog and you say, okay, what if I'm going to go after something here in a year or 2 years? And how do you go about doing that go, no go situation? I could see this really being an impactful tool to help them decide, maybe this is not the project that we can take on at this time, or
Yeah.
this is right in our wheelhouse and we can do this.
Yeah, and help make changes early on that the architect can incorporate that is going to save the constructability portion of the project. So, if we make this change now and we make this decision, this will create the ability for me to deliver on your budget. So it's really the possibilities are endless out there. Just, as we are able to gather, that cost data and pull it into one platform itself.
Now, do you ever see maybe TestFit diving a little bit into like the 4D scheduling side of things, or do you feel like it's more of like a authoring tool?
I think, if I was to give my gut reaction, would probably partner and more export into that information. And I think that's where the magic of a platform becomes, right? So we can export and continue the process into the construction documentation on the design side. I definitely see the opportunity to continuing on the estimating, on the scheduling. It's, possibilities, like I said, are endless.
Yeah, because I think that's one of the big things for GCs is, we have a budget at the beginning, but as the project goes, that 5D aspect of pulling in the schedule information and how much money is being spent over time as you're
Yeah.
going through that progress is a big part of that. Which leads back to a point, which is where the architect comes in. And I think one of the biggest powerful things we talked about earlier in their overall design is circulation, whether it's for parking or if it's building circulation. How does TestFit really, promote the ability to go through those options quickly?
Yeah, we're making improvements. Our parking configurator is probably one of the most powerful things that we have to offer, and that is in the free product as well. So it's a great tool, but making improvements to that, I've in the last couple of months, I'm not sure, when the listeners will hear this, but in the last couple of months, we've made some really great turn radius improvements, entrance to the site as we're looking into how we better serve retail customers.
Out of all the different buckets, multifamily, hotels, you name it, what do you see as the biggest construction need and who's using TestFit on the owner side?
So the biggest need is probably retail, but mostly because it's such a hot market right now. Where it's being used the most today is multifamily and industrial. So we're seeing a lot of high density, low density on the multifamily side, and then industrial. We're working with both, straight up industrial as well as data centers.
And on the multifamily, I would assume because it's more per bed per door within that facility versus, let's say, a mall that is more space oriented. So it's just a
Right.
really how a owner or developer looks at that profit revenue loss type of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Um,
it's
do,
more important than ever. I mean, with the cap rates right now, it's getting money is so expensive. So being able to really get a true, top level performa with the building on the site is where, they're being able to say no a lot quicker, but finding the needles in the haystack that will actually pencil.
and I feel like that's been a challenge since the pandemic. We saw a little bit of that before the pandemic, but it, especially right now, there's on the private side, there's a lot of tightening, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of reasons for that. But on the public market, it's wide open.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I think that the public market, has a big benefit of this too,
Hmm.
where they can take, let's say, an office building that they're going to have their staff and really use it for
Exactly.
that. Going forward, what do you think from your background of, let's say, Sonos and Procore? What is the biggest hurdle that TestFit has to get to the next step of where they want?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start where, or I'll go to where we started, which is generative design. I think, we have the in place today, we have, parameters and constraints that someone can enter, and our models are running what your options are. We're moving towards this summer being able to release more what we would consider as more of a true generative design solution. And basically taking those constraints, letting those fight with the goals, and doing that for commodity buildings, and letting us use those algorithms that we've developed that people can trust through that co-authoring and releasing, our first true generative design product, taking the logic from TestFit's own models and presets, and then using those user constraints to look at all of our models, find out what the best thing is to build on that land. So it's really transitioning from site feasibility into more of a building optimization.
And talking through that, what is the future of TestFit? What is your main focuses going forward?
Yeah, I think on the generative design side, I think, getting to that place where the user, the human, is able to start at an already optimized starting point. That's the goal. So thinking through future, individuals should be able to add their own parameters, like what is the corridor width that I need? How many floors do I need? And we'll be able to use those inputs that are inside of our current models today, and then being able to also test solutions that, the co-creation is happening. So as the user moves and edits the building that has been generated, the AI would continue to solve and suggest improvements to meet the goals. And those goals will eventually be able to create that, constraint to get to, these are my constraints, these are my goals, here's what we can actually model for you. And letting, and then eventually letting the user's own presets and models and, what their typical layouts are be input into that as well, where we get into more of the machine learning side of the algorithm.
And do you think that with those different concepts, do you see a world where the GC could use it for like logistics, not just on the front end and trying to determine if the deal is going to go through and we're going to build it, but logistically, how we go about building?
Yeah, I mean, I think I see in the very near future being able to get takeoffs, quantity takeoffs to be able to help with estimating in those earliest conceptual estimating phases. And I see a world where GCs would want to buy the software themselves as they are getting opportunities to bid in the earliest phases for design development.
And then my final question to you, final thoughts about where the state of AI is going to take us with generative design.
Yeah, I have a lot of hopes for where this can go, and I think it's really the limit of human imagination as to how we can leverage this. I think TestFit's really focused on, as I mentioned, trying to get that full potential of land with the scarcity that's out there. being able to solve in a way that is maximizing use is where we want to see this go. And I think, there's a world where everybody can have their own data from their own projects, being able to feed into something that can be set up with their constraints and their goals, and they can really find the best solution. And then the human can come in and make it livable.
Well, Laura, I wanted to thank you for joining me today on the Nearest
Absolutely.
podcast.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And I hope to see the new product here in the near future.
Yeah,
And
see it this summer.
yeah, absolutely, and see where TestFit will go from here. Thank you.
Thank you so much.